I never thought I'd be the guy telling this story. You know, the kind of story you hear secondhand and think, that can't be real. But it was my life. My wife and I had been married for 8 years. On paper, it looked perfect. We had the house, the vacations, the smiling photos at every party. People envied us. Said we were couple goals. I almost believed it too. But perfection is easy to fake. It started subtly. She began working late more often. Deadlines, she said. Team dinners, she'd add. At first, I didn't question it. She was ambitious, driven. I admired that about her. But over time, her laughter felt hollow. Her hugs lost warmth. She started guarding her phone like it held state secrets. It used to sit face up on the counter. Now it was always in her pocket. Always locked. I noticed, but I didn't confront her. I told myself I was being paranoid. That marriage had its seasons. That maybe we were just drifting a little and would find our way back. I didn't want to be that insecure husband who asked too many questions. I trusted her, too much, maybe. Then came the anniversary dinner. I booked her favorite restaurant. The one where we used to go during our dating days. I showed up early, brought her flowers, even wore that navy blue shirt she liked. She walked in, barely smiled, and spent half the evening scrolling on her phone under the table. When I asked her about work, she brushed it off. When I asked about us, she said, "Can we not make this deep tonight?" I nodded. Swallowed the ache. Tried to make the best of it. Later that night, as I lay in bed next to her, something didn't sit right. I couldn't sleep. I went downstairs to grab a glass of water, and as I set the cup down, I heard a buzz. Her tablet lit up. I shouldn't have looked. But I did. A message preview. "Last night was amazing. Same time next week?" I stood there, paralyzed. Everything froze. I opened the message thread. It wasn't a one-time thing. There were weeks of messages. Photos. Inside jokes. Things I hadn't heard her say to me in years. She called him babe. She told him she missed him. She sent selfies, the kind she hadn't sent me since our honeymoon. I wanted to scream. I wanted to wake her up and demand answers. But I didn't. I just stared at that screen, numb. My chest felt heavy, like something had collapsed inside me. All those memories, those shared moments, they suddenly felt cheap. I went back upstairs, crawled into bed next to her, and stared at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I didn't say a word. She kissed me on the cheek before leaving for work. I let her. I smiled. I played along. But inside, I was falling apart. For the next few days, I became a ghost in my own house. I watched her lie effortlessly, tell stories with ease, text him while laughing with me. I wanted to hate her. But more than anything, I hated how easily I let myself be blind. One afternoon, I sat on the edge of our bed, holding my wedding ring in my hand, trying to make sense of everything. That's when I remembered her coworker, Lena. She had warned me months ago at a company party. "She's not who you think she is," Lena had said softly, almost like she was apologizing for saying it. At the time, I dismissed it. Thought maybe she was jealous or just being petty. But now, her words echoed louder than ever. I found Lena on social media and sent a message. Just 5 words. "Can we talk? It's important," she replied within minutes. We met at a quiet cafe across town. When I walked in, she looked surprised, but not at my message. More like she had been waiting for this moment. She listened as I told her what I found. She didn't seem shocked. She just nodded slowly. "She's been seeing him for months," Lena said quietly. "Some of us knew. Most turned a blind eye. I tried to distance myself from it. Eventually, I just left the company." I thanked her. She looked at me with genuine sympathy. "You didn't deserve this," she said. "You're not the problem." That stuck with me. That night I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I sat in silence. For the first time in weeks, I felt something shift inside. I realized I wasn't going to let this break me. I wasn't going to beg or scream or fall apart. I was going to rebuild. Quietly. Deliberately. She wanted forgiveness without even offering an apology. She kept living like nothing happened, assuming I'd never find out, or that I'd just accept it if I did. But she underestimated one thing: I knew who I was. And I wasn't going to let her define me. This wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. I didn't confront her. Not yet. She kept walking through our home like everything was normal, asking if I'd picked up groceries or fed the dog, pretending like she wasn't sneaking out emotionally every single day. I answered her with the same neutrality, calm, controlled, deliberate. I had nothing left to give her in those moments, and that's when I knew I was done being her emotional safety net. I started observing her like an outsider. Every lie, every fake laugh, every late-night call she claimed was team strategy, I logged it. Not to throw in her face. Not to build a case. But to remind myself that this wasn't a mistake. It was a decision. Over and over, she chose someone else while keeping me as her emotional backup plan. I'd catch her smiling at texts and tilting the screen away from me. I no longer needed to know what was in those messages. I already knew what they meant. I stopped chasing truth from someone who clearly had no intention of giving it. At first, I thought the pain would crush me. But the longer I stayed quiet, the stronger I got. My silence became armor. It gave me time to think, not react. And in that silence, I made a decision. This wouldn't end with yelling, accusations, or begging. It would end with dignity. I started focusing on myself. I cleaned up my appearance. I got back into the gym. Not to attract anyone else, but because I needed to recognize the man in the mirror again. I'd lost him somewhere between compromise and betrayal. My days became more structured. My nights less heavy. I journaled every morning, even if it was just a line or two. I stopped trying to win her attention. I stopped measuring myself by her neglect. She didn't get the worst of me, but she sure as hell wasn't going to get the best anymore. I remembered something Lena said at that cafe. You deserve someone who doesn't make you question your own worth. I kept thinking about that. And strangely, I kept thinking about Lena. Not romantically, at least, not yet. But there was something grounding about her honesty. She was the first person in a long time who didn't speak in pretense. A week after our cafe meeting, I texted her again. Asked if she wanted to grab coffee. Not to talk about my wife. Just to talk. We met up. It was natural. Effortless. Like talking to someone who already understood the storm you'd been walking through. We didn't talk about betrayal. We talked about books, movies, old family stories. I hadn't laughed in weeks until that day. And maybe that's when the shift truly started, not just from her, but toward myself. My wife noticed the change. She commented on how I was distant lately. I nearly laughed. She asked if something was wrong. I told her, nothing I can't handle. She smiled, satisfied, and walked away. She had no idea I was already gone in every way that mattered. Then came the invitation. She left it on the counter like it was a casual note. Company gala, formal attire, spouse welcome. At the bottom, she scribbled, would love for you to come. Means a lot to me. I stared at it for a full minute. She actually had the nerve to invite me, to stand beside her as the loyal, supportive husband while she paraded her lie in front of the same people who probably knew more than I did. She wasn't inviting me because she loved me. She was inviting me because she wanted to look like she'd been forgiven. Like everything was fine. Like I was still the fool in her perfect picture. But I wasn't the fool anymore. I texted Lena. Do you still have that black dress you wore at last year's event? Want to crash one more? She replied with a single word. Absolutely. It wasn't about revenge. It was about reclaiming my place, not as her husband, but as my own man. I wasn't going to confront her. I wasn't going to expose her. I was going to walk into that room, stand next to the only person who told me the truth, and let silence speak for itself. The days leading up to the event were quiet. She assumed I'd forgotten. She never asked again. Just kept playing house, wearing her mask, oblivious that the script had already flipped. The night of the gala, I showed up 10 minutes early. Lena met me outside. She looked stunning, poised, calm, powerful. She smiled when she saw me. Ready? I nodded. We walked in together. And everything changed. The moment we stepped into the venue, heads turned. Conversations paused. Glasses froze halfway to lips. I didn't have to say a word, my presence did all the talking. And Lena, standing beside me with quiet confidence, only amplified it. We weren't dramatic. We weren't loud. We walked in like we belong. Because we did. She saw me before I saw her. Her eyes caught mine across the room. I watched her expression shift, from confusion to disbelief to something she couldn't disguise, fear. She hadn't expected me to show. She definitely hadn't expected Lena. She started walking toward us, but people intercepted her with greetings and small talk. She smiled at them, nodded, but kept glancing over. She was unraveling before even reaching us. Lena leaned in. She's already spinning, she whispered, barely moving her lips. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Everything that needed to be said was already written all over her face. We greeted people as they approached, some who recognized Lena from before, some who clearly hadn't been prepared to see this pairing. The irony was thick. I stayed composed. Calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done playing the betrayed husband. I wasn't broken. I was bulletproof. When she finally got close, her tone was all surface-level sweet. Oh, you made it, she said, eyes flicking from me to Lena, trying to maintain some illusion of control. And you brought her? I met her gaze steady. Of course. Wouldn't miss it for the world. She blinked. A pause stretched between us. She tried to laugh, brushing her hair behind her ear, like this was all just a quirky coincidence. I didn't know you two kept in touch, Lena answered before I could. Well, truth has a funny way of bringing people together. Her voice was soft, even unbothered. My wife didn't know where to look. She was searching for her script, but I had rewritten it. She tried to act unfazed, but her eyes were sharp, calculating. She kept glancing around, as if checking to see who was watching. Everyone was. Maybe not obviously, but people notice energy. They knew something was off. And that's what made it better. I didn't need a confrontation. The silence said everything. Throughout the evening, she attempted casual damage control, introducing me to people with that same practiced charm. I matched her energy, polite but detached. I smiled when I needed to. I shook hands. But I never pretended to be her husband, not in the way she wanted me to. The boss approached us at one point. A man I'd only met once before. He shook my hand firmly and looked at Lena. Good to see you again, he said, surprised but clearly intrigued. My wife stood beside him, tense. I could feel the effort in her smile. He asked how things were going. I replied, much clearer these days. It was the most honest thing I'd said all night. She tried to pull me aside later, away from the noise. Can we talk? She asked. I nodded and followed her just far enough that no one could hear, but not far enough for her to feel safe. You didn't think to give me a heads up? She asked in a hushed tone, tight with frustration. You didn't give me one when you started lying, I replied. She looked stunned. Not angry, just caught. Like she hadn't expected accountability to show up dressed in silence and self-respect. You're making a scene, she said quickly. I glanced around. Funny. I haven't raised my voice. Haven't said a thing about what you did. I came here exactly as invited. She clenched her jaw. Why her? I didn't hesitate. Because she told me the truth. That's more than you ever did. She had no reply. Just stared at me like she didn't recognize who I was anymore. And maybe she didn't. Because I wasn't the man who used to make excuses for her anymore. I wasn't the one who absorbed her lies in exchange for temporary peace. That version of me was gone. I walked back to Lena. We continued the evening like nothing happened. Smiled. Talked. Let her sit in her own discomfort without ever exposing her. That was the beauty of it. I didn't need revenge. I had closure. At one point during the dinner, she gave a speech, thanking her team, her mentors, her husband. She hesitated slightly before saying that last word, glancing at me. I didn't move. I didn't clap. I just watched her deliver a performance no one else realized was fiction. When the event ended, we said our goodbyes. Her coworkers looked between the three of us with subtle curiosity but said nothing. The whispers would come later, I was sure. Let them. Let the truth unravel on its own, without my hands on it. As we stepped outside, Lena looked at me and said, "Well, that was satisfying." I smiled. And clean. I didn't burn anything down. I didn't raise a scene. I didn't need to. Because she thought I'd come crawling back. She thought betrayal made her powerful. She thought silence meant weakness. She never expected Grace to be so devastating. The morning after the event, she didn't say much. She moved around the house stiffly, waiting for me to explode, to question her, to accuse her. But I gave her nothing. No reaction, no emotion, not even curiosity. That silence hurt her more than shouting ever could. Because deep down, she wanted a fight. A fight meant I still cared. My composure made her realize I had already let go. She finally broke the silence over breakfast. "Are you seriously not going to talk about last night?" I didn't look up. "What is there to talk about? You showing up with her, that was a choice. Like your choices?" I met her eyes. "We all make them." She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "You're being cruel." "No," I said calmly. "Cruelty is cheating on your husband for months and still expecting to be the victim when the truth shows up at your party." She didn't respond. She knew she had no defense. Not a real one. She started to play the familiar notes, the ones I'd heard before. "I was lonely. You were distant. We weren't connecting. I didn't plan for it to happen. I didn't plan to be betrayed either," I said. "Yet here we are." She kept talking, as if explaining the affair would somehow erase it. She tried to paint herself as confused, pressured, misunderstood. But nothing she said came from remorse. It was all justification. She wasn't sorry she cheated. She was sorry she got caught living two lives and couldn't control the narrative anymore. Then she said it, the line I had been waiting for. "I thought maybe we could work through this." I set my coffee down. "Work through what? The part where you lied every day while expecting me to stay loyal? Or the part where you invited me to that event hoping I'd play the role of the forgiving husband for your reputation?" She stayed quiet. "I didn't bring Lena to hurt you," I said. "I brought her because she was the only one in your world who didn't treat me like I was invisible." Her jaw tightened. "So what, you're dating now? That's not your concern anymore." And just like that, the mask slipped. I saw the flicker of bitterness in her eyes. Not because she loved me, but because I'd moved on faster than she expected. She thought she had time. Thought I'd sit in heartbreak long enough for her to regain control. But the truth was, she never really knew me. If she did, she'd have realized I wasn't the kind of man who begged to be kept. I told her I wanted a divorce. No long speech. No debate. Just clarity. She looked stunned. "You're serious?" I nodded. "I've never been clearer. You're willing to throw away everything?" I almost laughed. "You already did. I'm just not picking it up." She asked if we could go to therapy. I told her therapy doesn't fix someone who chooses betrayal every time they're uncomfortable. It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. And I wasn't willing to be the emotional punching bag every time life got hard for her. She cried. But I'd seen those tears before. They weren't for me. They were for her own guilt, her own image, her own loss of control. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. No more pretending. No more waiting for honesty from someone incapable of giving it. Over the next few days, I started the legal process. Quietly. Efficiently. I wasn't interested in dragging things out. I didn't want revenge or assets or a messy fight. I just wanted out. Word spread. People started reaching out. Some were shocked. Some said they saw it coming. The ones closest to us didn't even ask for details. They just offered support. And that's how I knew I wasn't alone in this. Lena stayed in touch. She didn't push. She didn't probe. She let me heal at my own pace. Some nights we'd talk for hours. Others, we'd just sit in silence on the phone. There was no pressure to define anything. Just presence. And that was enough. What surprised me most wasn't how much I had lost, but how much I had gained by finally walking away. I had time. I had peace. I had the ability to choose myself for once. I stopped explaining myself to people who never truly saw me. I stopped waiting for closure from someone who had burned the bridge. I realized I didn't need her apology. I needed my own permission to move forward. And I gave it to myself. Every day after that was a quiet step toward healing. Some days were heavy. Some weren't. But all of them were mine. And that was a start. The divorce process wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Precise. I kept it civil, factual, unemotional. She tried to stir things up, argued about the house, hinted at reconciling 1 minute, and blamed me the next. I didn't flinch. I answered every question with calm, every insult with silence. That silence, again, did more damage than shouting ever could. She couldn't handle that she no longer had control over my emotions. She brought up memories. Tried to pull me back into the comfort of the past. Remember our trip to Rome? Remember our wedding night? But I didn't respond with nostalgia. I responded with reality. None of that changes what you chose. Her pattern was clear: guilt, followed by deflection, then manipulation wrapped in false vulnerability. I saw through it every time now. Not because I was hardened, but because I was finally honest with myself. I had been carrying a relationship alone for years, mistaking my endurance for love. It wasn't love. It was survival. The truth is, you can't love someone into loyalty. You can't carry both your heart and their character. And I was done trying. When we met with the mediator, she kept glancing at me, expecting a crack. A moment of regret. But I gave her none. I signed the documents with the same energy I gave my vows: serious, intentional, final. After it was over, she stopped me outside. Are you really done? I looked at her. I was done the day I stopped trying to fix what you were actively breaking. She nodded slowly, realizing it was over in a way that couldn't be undone. She wasn't crying. Not anymore. Just standing there with the weight of consequences finally settling in. She didn't just lose a husband. She lost the version of me that once waited for her to come home emotionally. I walked away feeling nothing but relief. No anger. No sadness. Just clarity. And I realized that clarity is what peace feels like. That weekend, I went to a small get-together with some friends I hadn't seen in a while. Everyone noticed something different in me. You look lighter, one of them said. Like you're finally breathing again. I was. The more distance I got from the marriage, the more I saw it for what it really was. A slow erosion of self. A constant negotiation with disrespect. And I let it happen, thinking endurance was love. But endurance isn't love. It's just survival dressed up in hope. I started rediscovering parts of myself I had buried. My hobbies. My goals. My sense of humor. I wasn't just healing from betrayal. I was rebuilding from abandonment, from being emotionally neglected and gaslit for years. The cheating was just the final crack. The real damage was in the day-to-day disrespect that became normal. Lena and I stayed in touch. Still no labels. Still no pressure. Just consistency. She never tried to save me. She just reminded me I was worth saving. That mattered more than anything. We talked about everything: life, work, the quiet moments in between. Sometimes she'd tell me about how things were going at her office. I found it funny that she never once brought up my ex unless I did. That kind of restraint told me she wasn't trying to be part of the drama. She just wanted to be a presence I could count on. One evening, I thanked her for being there, for warning me when no one else would. Her reply was simple: "You deserve better. I just didn't want to see you forget that." That hit me harder than anything else in this entire journey. Because for years I had. I forgot my worth. I forgot that love isn't proven through pain tolerance. That a relationship isn't successful just because it survives. It's only successful if both people are growing and safe inside it. I realized that love isn't measured by how much you're willing to suffer. It's measured by how deeply you're respected. And I hadn't been. So I stopped looking back. I didn't check her socials. I didn't ask mutual friends for updates. I didn't care who she was with or what story she told about why we ended. Because the truth didn't need defending. I had lived it. That was enough. I poured my energy into my own growth. Read more. Traveled a little. Started writing again. And I noticed something beautiful. My smile was no longer a mask. My laughter didn't feel forced. I was free in a way I hadn't been in years. Not because I escaped a relationship, but because I reclaimed myself inside the silence I used to be afraid of. People started coming to me for advice. Friends going through similar things. They'd ask how I stayed so calm. How I didn't break. I'd tell them the truth, because I did break. I just didn't stay broken. I rebuilt differently. Stronger. Smarter. Softer, too, but with better boundaries. I told them what I wish someone told me sooner: love doesn't demand you disappear to keep the peace. And anyone who asks you to shrink so they can feel bigger isn't love. That's control. I learned that you can heal without getting an apology. That peace isn't about forgetting, it's about no longer needing what hurt you to make sense. And most importantly, I learned that moving on isn't about finding someone new. It's about finally finding yourself again. It had been a few months since the divorce was finalized. My world was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. There's a difference. The chaos was gone. The confusion, the second-guessing, the emotional minefields, gone. I didn't miss them. I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought she was, but not who she turned out to be. And that realization was everything. One afternoon, I got a message from one of her former coworkers. Not Lena, someone else. It was simple. "She's telling people you cheated on her. Just thought you should know." I stared at it for a second, then closed the app. I didn't reply. Didn't feel the need to correct the lie. The people who mattered knew the truth, and anyone who believed her version wasn't someone I needed in my corner. Smearing my name was her last desperate attempt at control. But what she didn't understand was that I had already won, not out of revenge, but out of release. I had nothing to prove. Let her spin whatever story she needed to justify her choices. I wasn't going back into that darkness just to clear my name in rooms I no longer walked into. Closure doesn't always come through conversation. Sometimes it comes through distance, through choosing not to participate in someone else's denial. That was my final boundary. No defense, no drama, just done. Around that same time, Lena and I had one of those quiet, defining talks. Not about labels. Not about, "What are we?" but about reality. She said, "I don't want to be your escape. I want to be your peace." I nodded. "You already are." There was no urgency to label things. No pressure to perform. Just mutual understanding. She had seen me at my lowest and never tried to fix me, only supported me while I fixed myself. That meant more than any romantic gesture ever could. I started helping others in similar situations. Online forums, private chats, even some in-person support groups. Not as a guru, not as someone with all the answers, but as someone who had walked through fire and figured out how not to stay burnt. One guy asked me, "How do you know when it's time to walk away?" I told him, When staying starts to cost you your self-respect? Another woman asked. How do you forgive someone who destroyed your trust? I answered, you don't forgive for them. You forgive for yourself, so you can stop drinking poison hoping they'll feel it. These weren't just quotes I found online. They were truths carved from experience. Pain teaches you things peace never could. But once you've learned, you don't stay in the pain. You use it to build better. There's this myth that leaving means you gave up. But the truth? Sometimes leaving is the love. The love you finally give yourself when someone else refuses to. And that's what I wish more people understood. That staying in something toxic doesn't make you loyal, it makes you lost. And loyalty should never require the betrayal of your own boundaries. Looking back, I don't regret loving her. I regret loving her longer than I should have. I regret giving chances that were never earned. But those were my lessons. Lessons that shaped who I am now. I learned that relationships don't fail because of one betrayal. They fail long before that, through 100 ignored red flags, through silences that should have been addressed, through slowly giving pieces of yourself to keep things stable, while the other person dismantles the foundation. I also learned that healing isn't linear. Some days I felt free. Other days, I'd feel a wave of sadness out of nowhere. Not because I missed her, but because I remembered how much of myself I gave to someone who never truly saw me. And that grief was valid too. But I never stayed in that sadness. I acknowledged it, processed it, and moved forward. Now my mornings felt different. Lighter. I woke up not with anxiety but with peace. No tension. No wondering what mood she'd be in. No decoding mixed messages. Just space to breathe, to think, to live. Love, I realized, should never feel like you're constantly at war, with them or yourself. I started writing more. Journaling. Recording thoughts. Not for anyone else. Just for me. To track growth. To hold myself accountable. To make sure I never let myself shrink in someone else's presence again. One entry simply said, I am not hard to love. I just gave my heart to someone who didn't know what to do with it. That sentence anchored me. Eventually, I crossed paths with people who only knew me post-divorce. They couldn't imagine me as someone who was once silent, uncertain, or dimmed. That was the best compliment. It wasn't about looking happy. It was about becoming whole again. Lena and I eventually did define our relationship. Slowly. Naturally. Not rushed. It wasn't built on trauma. It was built on mutual respect, communication, and emotional safety. There was no scoreboard. No control. Just two people showing up fully, honestly, every day. I never thought I'd trust again. Never thought I'd love again. But I did. Because I didn't let one person's betrayal become the blueprint for the rest of my life. And that's what I tell anyone going through it now. You're allowed to start over. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to heal without apology. Don't let the pain make you bitter. Let it make you better. I didn't get revenge. I got peace. And honestly, that made more jaws drop than anything else ever could.